$70 million. That's the number attached to the name Kristen Stewart today, an actress who got her start at 8 years old, became the most recognizable face on the planet by 20, and then did something almost nobody in Hollywood has ever had the guts to do. She walked away from blockbuster money on purpose. She turned down the gilded cage and went looking for something real. But here's the thing that most people miss when they talk about Kristen Stewart's wealth. It wasn't just Twilight that built her empire. It was what she did after Twilight that secured it. Because while the world was busy writing her off as yesterday's teen idol, Kristen Stewart was quietly building something: a production company, a directorial vision, an investment strategy rooted in art over algorithms. So today, we're going to pull back the curtain on all of it. How a girl from Los Angeles turned vampire fan fiction into a $70 million financial foundation. How she founded Nevermind Pictures, a women-led production company that just made its debut. And why, in an industry where most young stars blow their fortunes by 30, Kristen Stewart is still building hers. The answers will surprise you. And if you've ever dismissed her as just the girl from Twilight, get ready to reconsider everything. She's relevant right now in ways she hasn't been since Breaking Dawn, her feature directorial debut. The Chronology of Water premiered at the 2025 Cannes Film Festival to a 6.5-minute standing ovation. Critics are calling it one of the most courageous debut films in years, and it was produced entirely through her own company. This is the story of how she got here, and what it took to build a $70 million empire on her own terms. Let's start at the beginning, because Kristen Jamie Stewart's origin story is both more Hollywood and more real than you might expect. She was born on April 9, 1990, in Los Angeles, California, making her an Aries for anyone keeping track. And while being born in LA already puts you closer to the entertainment industry than most kids on Earth, Kristen's proximity was even tighter than that. Her father, Jon Stewart, worked as a TV producer and stage manager. Her mother, Jules Stewart, was a script supervisor and, later, a film director in her own right. This was not a family that talked about Hollywood from the outside looking in. This was a family that worked on set, drove to studios, and understood the industry from its bones outward. Kristen grew up with 2 older brothers, Cameron, who was biological, and 2 adopted brothers, Dana and Taylor, in a household where filmmaking was less a dream and more a profession her parents went to every day. What's fascinating, though, is that despite being drenched in show business from birth, Kristen didn't grow up dreaming of stardom. By her own account, she assumed she would end up behind the camera, a screenwriter or a director, not an actress. She was introverted, observant, more interested in watching the world than performing for it. She attended Rancho Cucamonga, and then later Granada Hills schools, before eventually switching to a combination of homeschooling and correspondence courses to accommodate her growing acting schedule. But in the early years, she was just a kid who liked to watch. The turning point came at age 8. She performed in her elementary school's Christmas play, and an agent in the audience spotted something in her. That agent made contact with her parents, and doors that most aspiring child actors spend years banging on simply swung open. It wasn't an accident of luck. Exactly. It was the combination of raw presence and an environment that knew how to translate that presence into opportunity. Still, young Kristen was not immediately enthusiastic about being in front of the camera. It would take years before she understood that acting was her actual language. Her first professional credit came in 1999, when she appeared in the Disney Channel original movie The 13th Year, a project her own mother was working on. Uncredited, barely a blip, but it counted. It was exposure to what a real set felt like. From there, she moved into slightly more visible territory with a small part in The Safety of Objects in 2001. She was still a child, still learning the rhythms of a working actor's life, still figuring out whether this was her calling or simply an extension of her parents' world? It was the next role that answered that question definitively. The audition that changed everything happened in 2001 when Kristen Stewart, then 11 years old, walked into a meeting for a major Hollywood thriller called Panic Room. The director was David Fincher. The lead actress was Jodie Foster. And the role available, the young daughter of a woman trapped in a home invasion, required a child actor who could hold her own on screen next to one of the most respected performers in the world. Kristen got the part. Panic Room was released in 2002, and Kristen Stewart, as Sarah Altman, the diabetic daughter caught in a life-or-death standoff, was immediately noticeable. She was 12, poised, and completely unafraid of the camera. Critics didn't necessarily single her out with awards attention, but the industry noticed. You don't make your real debut alongside Jodie Foster in a David Fincher film and disappear. Casting directors started paying attention. What followed was a period of steady, working actor momentum. She took roles in Catch That Kid in 2004, Zathura, a space adventure in 2005. Neither were major prestige projects, but they kept her on screen and kept Hollywood familiar with her face. She was 14 when she took her first true leading role. She was a teenager navigating auditions, early agents, and the particular pressure of being a child in an adult industry, and doing it all while trying to figure out who she actually was as a person. The role that began to sharpen her artistic identity came with Speak, a 2004 TV movie in which she played a high school freshman dealing with the aftermath of sexual assault. She was 13 when filming began. The material was serious, emotional, and demanding, exactly the kind of project where most child actors would have been out of their depth. Kristen wasn't. She received wide critical acclaim for the performance, and it began to signal something important. This was not a child actress who would be content with light fare. She was drawn to stories that hurt a little, roles that required her to excavate something real. Into the Wild in 2007 pushed her further in that direction. Working with director Sean Penn, playing a young woman who falls for a charismatic drifter played by Emile Hirsch, Stewart demonstrated that her naturalistic style, quiet, raw, deeply felt, translated powerfully to film. Adventureland in 2009 would continue this thread. Even between the massive commercial franchise she was about to enter, she kept finding her way back to character-driven indie work. That pattern was not accidental. It was instinct. And it would later become strategy. In 2007, Kristen Stewart auditioned for the film adaptation of Stephenie Meyer's best-selling vampire romance novel Twilight. The project, directed by Catherine Hardwicke, was independently financed and initially considered a modest-budget production. It squarely at the novel's enormous teen fanbase. Nobody involved fully anticipated what was about to happen. Kristen was cast as Bella Swan, the quiet, introspective teenager who falls in love with Edward Cullen, a vampire played by a virtually unknown British actor named Robert Pattinson. The chemistry between them was considered essential to the film's success. When it came together on screen, it didn't just work, it ignited. Twilight was released in November 2008 and grossed $392 million worldwide against a production budget of roughly $37 million. It became one of the most profitable films of that year. For Kristen Stewart, it was a seismic shift. She was 18 years old, and she was suddenly famous in the way that very few people on earth ever become famous. The kind that is impossible to walk back, that follows you into restaurants and grocery stores and airports, that turns the whole world into a stage, whether you want it to be or not. For that first Twilight film, Kristen earned $2 million. It was a significant paycheck for a teenager, but it barely hinted at what was coming. Lionsgate greenlit sequels immediately. New Moon followed in 2009, Eclipse in 2010, Breaking Dawn Part 1 in 2011, and Breaking Dawn Part 2 in 2012. By the time the franchise reached its conclusion, Kristen had negotiated her salary up to $25 million per film, for the final 2 installments, plus a 7.5% back-end deal on the gross receipts. The entire Twilight saga grossed over $1.3 billion worldwide at the box office. Run the math and the numbers are staggering. Estimates suggest Kristen earned somewhere in the range of $115 million from the franchise when all salary and back-end payments are accounted for. Her net worth today, officially estimated at $70 million across multiple financial publications, reflects that foundational wealth, shaped by taxes, investments, lifestyle, and the years of deliberate financial strategy that came afterward. In 2012, she was the highest-paid actress in the world, with total earnings of $34.5 million in a single year. That same year, she earned $9.5 million for her role in Snow White and the Huntsman alongside Chris Hemsworth. She was 22 years old and had already generated more wealth than most working actors accumulate in an entire career. But here's where it gets interesting, because most people who hit that kind of money at that age either spend it lavishly and watch it evaporate, or they retreat into the safety of another franchise, another guaranteed paycheck. Kristen Stewart did neither. She made a choice that Hollywood rarely forgives, and that, paradoxically, turned out to be the smartest financial and artistic move of her life. The post-Twilight pivot could easily have gone wrong. It often does. When an actress is synonymous with a specific role at a specific moment in pop culture, the temptation is to chase another version of that same success. Studios offer those deals constantly: sequels, spin-offs, franchise adjacents. The money is real, the creative risk is minimal, and the audience is already built. Kristen looked at all of that and said no thank you. What she said yes to was France. In 2014, she starred in Clouds of Sils Maria, directed by Olivier Assayas. The film is a cerebral, quiet, demanding piece of work, a meditation on aging, identity, and the relationship between an actress and her young assistant. It played at Cannes and received extraordinary critical reception. More significantly, Kristen Stewart won the César Award for Best Supporting Actress, the César being essentially France's version of the Oscar, the French film industry's highest honor. She was the first American actress ever to win the award. Let that land for a moment. The girl from Twilight became the first American actress in history to win France's most prestigious acting prize. That is not a footnote. That is a complete rewriting of a narrative. She returned to work with Assayas on Personal Shopper in 2016, playing a grief-stricken medium working as a personal assistant to a celebrity in Paris. The film divided critics and fascinated them equally. It was strange, unresolved, atmospheric, and her performance was praised as some of the finest work of her generation. She earned a BAFTA nomination for it. These were not blockbuster-sized paychecks, but they were investments in a different kind of currency, artistic credibility that would compound over time. Other projects filled the years between these anchoring roles. Certain Women in 2016, with Kelly Reichardt, CAF Society with Woody Allen, Lizzie in 2018, Underwater in 2020, which was more commercial in ambition but still showed range. The Charlie's Angels reboot in 2019 earned her somewhere between $5 million and $7 million, despite underperforming at the box office. And then came the role that most fully demonstrated her transformation. In 2021, Pablo Larraín cast her as Princess Diana in Spencer. It was a performance of devastating precision, internalized, fragmented, raw. She received her first Academy Award nomination for Best Actress. Not bad for someone the industry had spent a decade trying to categorize as a teen franchise product. Through all of this, Kristen was not simply accepting roles that came to her. She was building. Financially, her teamed business managers and financial advisors, who have kept a deliberately low profile, were moving her Twilight earnings into real estate and other long-term investments. She has owned property in Los Angeles for years, with estimates suggesting real estate holdings worth several $1 million. She's never been associated with the kind of reckless spending that burns through Hollywood fortunes quickly. No yacht fleet, no private jet owned outright, no visible excess. Her fashion presence comes largely through Chanel, where she's been a major ambassador since 2013, an endorsement deal that has added millions to her portfolio without requiring her to compromise her artistic identity. What most people don't know is that, while she was building her acting resume in the indie world, she was also building toward a much larger ambition, becoming a filmmaker herself. Kristen Stewart's interest in directing didn't arrive suddenly. It developed slowly, organically, through years of watching great directors work, Fincher, Penn, Assayas, Lorraine, and absorbing their methods from the other side of the lens. In 2017, she made her directorial debut with a short film called Come Swim, a dreamlike, experimental piece she also wrote and helped score. It premiered at Sundance to modest but positive attention. Critics called it impressionistic and bold. More importantly, it confirmed something she already suspected. She thought visually. She had a filmmaker's instincts. The short was a proof of concept, a statement that she was serious about this next chapter. Then, in 2023, she formalized that intention with the founding of Nevermind Pictures, a women-led production company she co-founded with two essential collaborators, her wife, screenwriter and producer Dylan Meyer, and producer Maggie McLean. The company's mission is rooted in a specific vision, developing and producing stories that are artistically uncompromising, told from perspectives that major studio pipelines tend to overlook. Nevermind Pictures is not a vanity label. It is a working production entity with a clear creative identity and real industry partnerships, including a co-production arrangement with Scott Free Productions, the company founded by legendary director Ridley Scott. The first major project out of Nevermind Pictures was also one of the most ambitious things Kristen Stewart could have attempted, an adaptation of Lydia Yukinovich's celebrated 2011 memoir, The Chronology of Water. The book is raw, non-linear, explicit, and emotionally demanding. The memoir of a woman who survived childhood sexual abuse, channeled her pain into competitive swimming, and ultimately found healing through writing. It is not an easy story to translate to screen. Hollywood had not rushed to option it. Kristen spent 8 years developing the project. 8 years of reading drafts, having conversations, figuring out the visual language, finding the right approach to material that could easily be mishandled. She wrote the screenplay herself alongside Andy Mingo. She directed. She produced through Nevermind Pictures. And when The Chronology of Water premiered in the Uncertain Regard section of the 2025 Cannes Film Festival, one of the most prestigious slots in world cinema, it received a 6-minute standing ovation. Critics erupted. Variety called it far more artful and captivating than anyone expected from a first feature. The Hollywood Reporter praised Stewart's commitment to the material. The film stood at 93% on Rotten Tomatoes, based on early critical reviews. The Forge acquired North American distribution rights and positioned the film for a December theatrical release in New York and Los Angeles, an awards qualifying run, followed by a wider release in January 2026. The BFI acquired UK distribution, with a release in February 2026. What does this mean financially? It means Nevermind Pictures, in its very first outing as a production company, produced a film that premiered at Cannes competition, earned critical unanimity, secured major North American and UK distribution deals, and entered the awards conversation with real momentum. That is an extraordinary debut for any production company, let alone one founded by an actress-turned-director who the industry once thought was just a franchise face. The financial model of a production company like Nevermind Pictures operates on multiple levels. As a producer on The Chronology of Water, Kristen participates in the film's financial returns beyond just her directing fee. Back-end deals for producers, distribution advances, future streaming rights negotiations, all of these represent income streams that extend well beyond a single paycheck. And the credibility established by a premiere and strong critical reception directly increases the value of Nevermind Pictures as an entity for future projects. Let's talk about the actual mechanics of Kristen Stewart's $70 million fortune, because the number itself is less interesting than how it was assembled and how it is being protected and grown. The foundational layer is Twilight. As we've established, somewhere in the range of $115 million in total compensation from the franchise, salary plus backend, flowed through her accounts between 2008 and 2013. After taxes, management fees, and agent commissions, a significant portion remained. That remaining sum became the seed capital for everything that followed. Her salary progression after Twilight tells its own story. She earned $9.5 million for Snow White and The Huntsman in 2012. After that, as she deliberately shifted towards smaller projects, her per-film fees dropped significantly, but she was okay with that. A film like Clouds of Sils Maria would have paid her a fraction of her Twilight rate. That's the trade-off she accepted consciously. The Caesar Award that came from that film, however, opened doors worth far more in the long run. It's the kind of career investment that doesn't show up immediately on a net worth spreadsheet, but compounds quietly over years. Real estate has been a significant pillar of her wealth strategy. Los Angeles property has historically been one of the most reliable long-term investments available to high earners in that market, and Kristen has owned multiple properties there over the years. Her homes have been consistently described as private, architecturally interesting spaces, rather than the ostentatious estates associated with traditional Hollywood excess. She values privacy and space over spectacle, which tracks with everything else we know about her financial personality. The Chanel partnership, which began around 2013, has been a recurring and lucrative income stream. Brand ambassadorships of that caliber, representing one of the world's most prestigious luxury houses, typically command multi-million-dollar annual retainers. Chanel has used her image in global campaigns for fragrances, including Coco Mademoiselle and clothing lines, and the relationship has endured for over a decade, an unusually long tenure that speaks to its mutual value. She's also been associated with Balenciaga. These fashion partnerships generate income that is, in many ways, the cleanest money in entertainment, high value, low time commitment, and image enhancing rather than image diluting. Her philanthropy adds a dimension worth noting, both personally and financially. She famously arranged a meeting with an anonymous Middle Eastern prince to raise funds for Hurricane Sandy relief, reportedly generating $500,000 toward that cause. She has been consistent in her support of LGBTQ causes, particularly relevant given her own public coming out as bisexual during a Saturday Night Live monologue in 2017. Philanthropic giving also carries tax implications that sophisticated wealth management teams use strategically. The founding of Nevermind Pictures in 2023 represents what may be the most forward-looking financial decision of her career to date. Production companies, when they work, and Nevermind Pictures has already worked spectacularly in its first outing, become engines of compounding value. They allow their founders to participate in the financial upside of projects beyond just an acting or directing fee. They build intellectual property libraries, they establish brands, and they position their founders as players in the industry other than simply hired talent. As of early 2026, Kristen Stewart is arguably the busiest and most critically vital she has been since the early 2010s. Her personal life has found stability. She married screenwriter Dylan Meyer in an intimate Los Angeles ceremony in April 2025, with Meyer serving not just as her life partner, but as a genuine creative collaborator, co-founder of Nevermind Pictures and accredited producer on The Chronology of Water. This is the rare Hollywood partnership, where personal and professional lives intersect with genuine creative synergy other than forced collaboration. The chronology of Water is now in active awards season campaigning. The Forge is positioning it as a centerpiece of their awards push, with critics specifically singling out Imogen Poot's performance and Stewart's direction for consideration. Given the cam reception and the critical scores, there is legitimate expectation of awards nominations across multiple bodies. For Kristen personally, a directorial nomination would be yet another first, and another chapter in a career that has consistently defied expectation. What comes next for Nevermind Pictures is the question the industry is watching closely. The company has demonstrated, on its first outing, that it can attract serious collaborators, Scott-free Productions, CG Cinema International, Fremantle, and navigate the global festival circuit successfully. That access will expand with each successful project. The model of a creative production company built around a filmmaker actress's vision, producing quality independent content for theatrical and festival release, is not a new model, but Kristen brings to it a specific combination of financial resources, industry relationships, and artistic credibility that few people in her position could match. She has spoken in interviews about wanting to direct more. She has described the chronology of Water as the project she needed to make first, the one that had been living inside her for nearly a decade, and suggested that having made it, she now feels freer to pursue other visions. She has also been clear that she is not abandoning acting. She recently starred in Love Me, a sci-fi romance. She has never talked about retirement. She has talked, repeatedly, about wanting to make things that matter, films that take risks, that trust their audiences, that are not designed by committee. There's a lesson in Kristen Stewart's story that doesn't get told often enough, precisely because it doesn't fit the conventional Hollywood narrative. The conventional narrative says, get famous young, stay famous by playing it safe, collect the paychecks while they come. Kristen's actual story says, use the platform to get paid, then use the money to buy your freedom. That is a fundamentally different approach to a career in the entertainment industry, and it is also, functionally, a fundamentally different approach to wealth management. Most actors who earn big during a franchise period either spend it or park it passively. Kristen did something more active. She used her Twilight wealth as runway. Runway to take artistically demanding roles that didn't pay blockbuster salaries. Runway to build the reputation she wanted, rather than the reputation the industry assigned to her. Runway, ultimately, to found Nevermind Pictures and step behind the camera on her own terms, without needing anyone's approval or financial backing to get started. The $70 million sitting in her portfolio is not the end of a story. It is the foundation of one. For aspiring actors watching this, the lesson is specific. The money from your biggest commercial success is most valuable not as a destination, but as a bridge. A bridge to the work you actually want to make, the creative identity you actually want to build. Kristen Stewart earned more money from Twilight than most people see in 10 lifetimes, and she used it to become a filmmaker. That is a legitimate strategy. That is, in fact, a masterclass. Her work ethic is something that surfaces in virtually every interview and behind-the-scenes account. She reportedly spent 8 years developing the chronology of Water, not because the project was always stalled, but because she refused to start shooting until the screenplay was exactly right. 8 years is a commitment that most actors, producers, and studios would walk away from long before completion. She didn't. She also brings that same commitment to her acting roles. The physical and emotional preparation for Spencer, for instance, was described by director Pablo Larraín, extraordinarily rigorous, with Kristen working 4 months to inhabit Diana's specific physicality and psychological state. Her approach to the industry's changing landscape is also worth noting. Streaming has fundamentally altered the economics of film, and Kristen has navigated that shift by continuing to prioritize theatrical, festival circuit work. The Chronology of Water is being released theatrically with full awards support before going to streaming. That is a deliberate choice about the kind of cinematic experience she wants to create and the kind of credibility she wants to maintain. It is also, from a business perspective, the choice most likely to generate genuine prestige value for Nevermind Pictures as a brand. Her representation matters in a deeper sense too. As a publicly bisexual woman in Hollywood, she has been visible in ways that cost her commercially in some quarters and earned her an intensely loyal community in others. Her willingness to be openly herself, something she has been consistent about since her SNL coming out in 2017, has made her a figure of genuine significance to the LGBTQ community, and has informed both the projects she chooses and the company she founded. Nevermind Pictures is described explicitly as women-led. The Chronology of Water is, at its core, a story about a woman finding her voice after years of being silenced by male violence. These are not accidents, so let's bring it home. $70 million. That's the number we started with, and it's the number that multiple sources, Celebrity Net Worth, Forbes estimates, and industry analysts consistently attach to Kristen Stewart's name. But by now you understand that the number is almost beside the point. What matters is what the number represents, and what is being done with it. $115 million in Twilight compensation, shaped over a decade of taxes, investments, and deliberately modest spending, into $70 million in verified net worth. Real estate holdings in Los Angeles, a decade-plus Chanel ambassadorship that generates consistent multi-million-dollar income. A production company, Nevermind Pictures, founded in 2023, that just debuted at Cannes to a 6.5-minute standing ovation. And a directorial career that is, as of early 2026, very much in its first chapter, compared to her Twilight co-star Robert Pattinson, who is estimated at around $100 million in net worth, benefiting significantly from the Batman franchise. Kristen has taken the less commercially obvious path. But the trajectory of Nevermind Pictures, if it continues as it has begun, could narrow that gap in ways that have nothing to do with franchise paychecks. A successful production company that builds a library of acclaimed films is worth considerably more over time than any single salary. The story of Kristen Stewart is not a story about a girl who got lucky with vampires. It's a story about a girl who understood from a young age that Hollywood would try to define her, and who spent her entire adult life redefining herself on her own terms. From Panic Room at 12, to the Caesar Award at 24, to Spencer's Oscar nomination at 31, to the Cannes standing ovation at 35, each chapter has been a deliberate expansion of what she allows herself to be. She is, right now, one of the most interesting people working in film. Not because of her net worth, not because of Twilight, but because she did something genuinely rare. She took the money the machine gave her and used it to build something the machine would have funded on its own. And Nevermind Pictures is just getting started. We'd love to know, what's your favorite Kristen Stewart performance? Is it Bella Swan? Is it Princess Diana in Spencer? Is it Personal Shopper? Drop it in the comments below. And if you haven't already, subscribe, because next week we're diving into another Hollywood story that is far more complex, far more financially fascinating, and far more inspiring than the headlines ever told you. Don't miss it.